Good morning, ECOS line team. Welcome again to our Live Line Training Center in South Carolina. It's April 2024. It's a beautiful day. And Mr. Mack Turner, he's going to be presenting Training the Trainer for Success. This is going to be episode 043. Mack has been here twice prior, and highly recommend to grab a hold of all his full-length recordings, all his episodes and topics. He does a great job, brings a lot of heart and passion into the industry, and you'll hear that in his training and his leadership skill development regarding watching out for each other. So Mack is a special person to me. I met him about 3 years ago at an IP Incident Prevention Conference in Dallas, Texas. And it's when I first came up to folks and said, hey, I got this idea to start some Lineman Safety National webinars, and we need to form a team. We got to do it together. And Mack and Jimmy Vaughn, they agreed to do it almost before I could get the words out of my mouth. And so, they bring it. So they bring it all the time. And Mack, he's a certified utility safety professional. He's senior director of the Institute for Safety and Powerline Construction. He's also with the Safety Management International, and he's also with T&D PowerSkills group. And just like to introduce Mr. Mack real quick, and then maybe Mack, if you could give like a brief synopsis of those three companies and what you do, brother.
All right. ISPC is a not-for-profit company, and we focus on electrical utility safety and training. That's our whole mission. Nobody's got to get hurt. Nobody's got to die. One of our sister companies is T&D PowerSkills. It's a curriculum, a 78-unit curriculum based around a lineman apprenticeship continuing education, and it is available out there on LMS or instructor-led format. Companies and entities buy that. A lot of community colleges and that use that as their basic training. Safety Management International is a project management, a site safety support, and site incident command support company. So when things go bad, we step in and assist people with the management of restoration efforts. All three companies work together, share the same employees in the same space. ISPC also has some curriculum. We have a substation curriculum and metering curriculum, and we're developing custom curriculum all the time. But our whole mission between our three companies is really nobody needs to get hurt. Nobody needs to suffer the consequences of unsafe behavior or unsafe conditions. And that's just really the way that we think. Thank you.
Yeah, so just so everybody knows, the ISPC, SMI, and T&D PowerSkills, they are dedicated to this movement of our nationwide electric culture of safety. And Mack, just for an example, he traveled from Utah starting Sunday. Here it is Tuesday. He traveled all day yesterday. And these folks that come here, I think, 6 to 8 speakers, presenters a year, right, Mack?
Yeah, we got 8.
8?
8 times this year.
Yeah. So they're very serious about sharing their expertise and their passion. And I've had the privilege to meet all these folks that are working inside with these three companies. And I've had the privilege to see and hear about the development of the curriculum, the development of work methods and best safe work practices, and seeing and hearing and everything that's going on behind the scenes that they develop specially and exactly for each customer as far as their needs. And great detail. I mean, it's, to me, what they put is like, it's hard to find an allegory or analogy, but the analogy is like walking through an art museum. Seriously. And you see in all this art, this beautiful art, these most famous painters, and everybody's ooh and awe and just in wonderment at a particular picture. Well, me, when I see what they develop and what they produce for the customers, it's like, whoa, So anyways, give Mack your ear, and we're greatly thankful for you being here, brother. Okay, thanks, Mack.
All right, today's webinar is Training the Trainer for Success, and it's kind of one of my passions. I have a few core beliefs, and I believe that, one, there's no common sense, there's only common knowledge. So each and every one of us deserve to be trained in what we're expected to know and what we're expected to do. And I believe that it's an obligation of companies and employers to train their people properly and to give them the tools that they need to succeed. So what I've put together here is kind of tailored toward trainers and what trainers need to be and kind of what training needs to be as well. We're going to talk about a lot of different principles today on how to do training properly. The first thing that I want to kind of bring out here is, in our industry, we tend to take a person who's really good in the field, a person who can get the job done, get it done efficiently and effectively, and could run a crew well and just take care of business. And we tend to bring those people in and ask them to be trainers. And a lot of people can make that transition easily and quickly. But then there's also a bunch of us who we might be good in the field, but then we get put into something that we're really not comfortable with or we don't know anything about, and we don't give those trainers the tools they need to succeed. And we are doing a disservice not only to those trainers, but to the people that we've asked them to train. So in this presentation, we're going to address that and a whole lot more. So let's get started. What we would like to leave you with this training is understand how a blended approach of passive and participatory training will lead to a better outcome, and see how adults learn with learning styles. So let's talk about how adults learn. So back a few years ago, there was this gentleman called Malcolm Knowles, and he developed a humanist learning theory and the use of learner-constructed contracts or plans to guide the learning experience. So he really discovered and studied how adults learn. So we have some adult learning principles that no matter what kind of training that you're in, we as adults know that we learn certain ways. So, self-directed. Adults take responsibility for their learning. That's different from adolescents or teenagers or that. Adults, we're going to take responsibility. 2, relevance. Learning content must relate to personal or professional life. Okay, adults have lots on their mind, lots going on. So if it doesn't pertain to what they deal with every day, it's a little bit hard. And experience-based learning. So prior experiences inform adult learning. As adults, we bring life skills and what we've learned in life, things that we've learned throughout our careers, we bring that to the training, whether we're a trainer or a trainee. And then problem-centered approach. So learning focused on real-world problem solving. Our trade has different things every day. It's not like we're in a manufacturing where we're sitting in front of the same machine every day, pressing the same levers, doing the same task. Now, we might do the same task over and over again, but the environments change. So we have to have a problem-centered approach because not every job site, not every day is the same. We need to have intrinsic motivation. Its learning goals must be meaningful for adults. So if it's not relevant to what we do, we adults tend to just pass it over. Respect for the learner's autonomy. We've got to treat adults as equals. Now, I grew up in a family of teachers. My mother was a teacher in high school and in elementary. Both of my sisters have been teachers in middle school and elementary school. And one thing that I learned from them is the way that they had to teach kids and the way that we have to teach adults is different. And so when I first started training, I asked my mother and my two sisters, okay, well, how do you do this? And so they showed me lesson plans, and they showed me an awful lot of stuff, but it didn't speak to me because they was teaching somebody different. Training's got to be meaningful, or else we'll tune out. Respect for the learner's autonomy, we got to treat adults as equals, and then flexibility in learning styles, we got to accommodate diverse learning preferences. Not all of us learn the same way. We got to apply new knowledge or skills immediately for immediate application. It's hard for us as adults because our minds are so cluttered with everything to learn a concept and then not use it for a while. We tend to forget it. We need to have collaborative learning. We've got to exchange ideas and experiences with peers. We as adults got to understand that as much as we know, we don't necessarily know everything. And if we can talk to our peers back and forth, we as trainers and we as adults have the ability to learn more. And we got to have continuous learning. Lifelong learning supports career growth and development. It's not over just because you got out of class. So there's three basic styles of learning. There is visual, which we instinctively follow directions. We can easily visualize objects. We have a great sense of balance and alignment, and an excellent organizer. There's auditory, which we understand subtle changes in tone in a person's voice, writing responses to lectures, oral exams, storytelling, solving difficult problems, and working in groups. And then there's kinesthetic. Great hand-eye coordination, quick reception, excellent experimenters, good at sports, art, and drama, and bring high levels of energy. So those are the basic three styles of learning that adults learn by. And most of us use a combination of those three styles. Some of us are more hands-on, more kinesthetic. Some of us are more auditory. Some of us are more visual. But we bring all three of those to our learning experience. So there's different types of training. There's online, and I know that's all the rage, especially since COVID hit. But we got to understand that it has its limits, as all of them do. The old traditional instructor-led model works well in our industry because we're kind of hands-on and we respond a little bit better to a person that's in person that we can experience with, as opposed to somebody that's online. The student workbook. Some of us really like those workbooks. We take notes, we follow along, we keep them for future reference. In the field, a lot of us, and I'm one of them that came up through this trade, learning in the field initially and had to ask for some more formal training. But we learn in the field every day. In the middle of the task or timeout. A lot of times we'll learn by those little informal conversations that we have in the middle of the task. And then after the fact, this thing that we don't do enough in our type of business, I believe that we need to have an after the fact. Just like we have a pre-job or a tailboard meeting, we have to have an after the fact or the end of the day get together and talk about what went right and what went wrong. So, delivery methodology. Okay, there's passive training and participatory training. So passive training is scalable across the workforce. It reduces the need for employee travel. Consistent training content is unaffected by instructor bias, and it's self-paced. And some of us respond well to that, some of us don't. Then participatory training. Trainers facilitate Q&A sessions and retrieval practice. Students convene in the training yard for contextual review. Real-world applications challenge learners' skills and performance, and engagement in practical application enhances learning. Now, a lot of us in our trade lean toward this participatory training. We're hands-on people. We want to get out there. We want to do it. We want to be involved in it. We got to scale the training. We got to make training precise and to the point. We got to understand how adults learn. We need to avoid unnecessary embellishments. We need to recognize generational and personality differences, and we need to include senior leadership for buy-in. And this is one of the places where in our industry I see that we fail. We get told to go do something, so we develop training, we facilitate the training, but we don't have leadership buy-in to it, so we're really just spinning our wheels. We need to make sure that we have things flexible so that we can roll with the punches and roll with the times. We need to arm trainers with the time and the tools. As we spoke earlier, just because people are great in the field does not mean that they'll be good trainers. And if we ask them to be trainers, we need to assist them with their training skills, because if they've never done it before, they really don't know what they're doing. We need to give new trainers time to find their way. Got to understand that this is a process. You can't just flip a switch and be a good trainer. And trainers need to develop their own style. Now, usually, if I'm not in front of a camera, I'm up walking around, and I'm not the guy that trains and does a lecture. I don't like lectures, so I don't want people to have to sit through lecture. I like an interactive training style, and mine is different than probably anybody else's. We need to make sure that we have the tools that we can speak to as trainers. Some of us do really good with lecture, and all we need is a PowerPoint. We just need something like that. But most of us, especially in our field, we need a whole lot of different tools. And we need to understand that nobody can succeed without the proper tools. If we don't have the proper tools, we can't do the job, just like we can't out on the line. If you don't have the tools you need, the job don't get done. We need to craft an experience. We need to make the presentation fit. Just because we have a PowerPoint or a presentation, a video or whatever, does not mean that it's going to fit the application that we're trying to. We need to make the presentation relatable. We need to use personal and learner experiences. We all thrive on what we have learned through time. And some of the old dogs in the trade have a lot of experience and have a lot of tools and a lot of knowledge and skills that they can pass on. Lectures should not be your first choice. Now, a lot of people get a lot out of lectures, but I find in our field, we're not them. We like a variety of things. We'll sit for a little bit of lecture, but we're not going to sit for 8 hours. Storytelling and learner involvement are important. I know that we've all got little stories and experiences, but we also need to involve our audience and let them tell some of their experiences. We need to understand the difference between analytical and emotional involvement. And this whole emotional involvement is important. It helps people buy in. And as trainers, we've got to figure that out. Now, we've got to talk about the analytical side as well. Got to start with a personal touch. So one of the first things that I do when I come into a group to be trained, and whether I know them and whether I see them every day or they're a new group, I start out the day as, how y'all doing? And I make them respond to me. And I won't take until they all start responding to me. I won't give up. We want to make sure that we involve everybody up front and make sure that we recognize everybody. Introductions are important. Now, before COVID, I used to go around the room and look people in the eye, hold out my hand, shake their hand, ask them a little bit about themselves. And I believe that that's still a really good way to do introductions. Now, after COVID, we kind of stay away from the handshake still. We kind of keep our distance a little bit, but we still need to get introductions done, not only for us as a trainer, but for the trainees. We need to engage the participants. I've got this saying that nobody audits one of my classes. I won't allow them to. If they sit in the back and they don't want to engage, too bad, so sad. I force them to be engaged. And good trainers will do that, because if they're just going to sit back and audit the class, they might as well not be there. We need to share anecdotes, stories, or ask questions that intrigue and enlighten. So leading questions are important. And if you don't understand the concept behind leading questions, it's, ask a question that inspires them or requires them to think about an answer. Remember, people resonate with experiences and emotions more than facts. You know, we can, and years ago I used to quote BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, facts and figures, and this is our incident rate, and this is blah, blah, blah. That's not important. I can't remember when I went back to those kinds of things. We really need to talk about, you know, our experiences and the emotions behind it, and why we do things, as opposed to facts and figures, because everybody's going to tune you out. We need to understand the room's pulse. Every training is different. You might know the people, you might have worked with them for the last 10 years, but the environment in whether it's formal training or on-the-job training or whatever, it's different every day. We got to identify those learners and those auditors. And those auditors, we can't allow them to audit. We just can't. A good trainer will not allow the auditors to audit. We need to recognize groups or cliches between the participants. We got to play to them if they're positive, or reorganize the room structure if negative. So a lot of trainings, you'll get little groups that maybe work together, a crew, and they're all sitting together and they're all kind of talking about their own thing, and you've got all these little groups and these little cliques. If I recognize that first break, I'm going to mix them up. I'm going to get them up out of their seats. I'm going to assign them different areas, and I might do that 2 or 3 times throughout the day. It just depends on the group. But if you let those little cliques stay there, they do have, there's some good that can come out of that, but they also are kind of involved in their own little world. So we got to mix that up. Anyway, we've got to recognize when they've had enough and need a break. Now, it's important to know that, especially in our trade, the mind can only absorb what the butt can endure. So we got to get people up and moving around. We need to understand the room's pulse. Understand that every gesture and silent response by learners is feedback. Now, I really tune in on body language. And if I look out over the group and I see some auditors back there, or people that, you know, daring me to tell them something they didn't know or something like that, you've got to tune into that, and you got to recognize that. You got to pivot your message and presentation style to the room's heartbeat. And there's been many times that I've gone into a room with their prepared training, and by the end of the first break, we're talking about something related but a little bit different, and in a different way, because the room is probably not going to accept the way that you came in sometimes. We've got to create a symphony of shared aspirations. We got to find some common ground in there that everybody speaks to. We need to be genuine. People can detect insincerity. Folks, you got to put your heart and soul into it as a trainer. If you're just there, a talking head, people are not going to get anything out of it. Got to believe in what you're saying, and if you don't, your students will recognize that. If you think back to a time when you stumbled, it was probably because you questioned or had doubt on what you were saying. Now, all trainers stumble, and you'll see me stumble today some. But we've got to be convinced as trainers that what we have to say and what we're going to talk about is important and relevant. And if we don't, if we haven't prepared, if we're just the talking head out there, we're going to fail. Got to have some active listening out there. We've got to pay close attention to the reactions of people in the room. Now, it's really easy for people's emotions to get involved, and that's all right. But there's a time and a place for that. And we need to understand and keep looking at our audience and keep reevaluating them. We got to adjust our approach based on the nonverbal clues. If you've got a bunch of auditors in there and they're sitting back here and just daring you to tell them something that is relevant to them, you've got to change your approach. You just got to do something different. And there's various things you can do to make that happen. And then we've got to demonstrate our empathy and our flexibility. If you're just going to stay on cue with what you have prepared and not involve them, you're going to fail. We need to provide the visual engagement. You got to use photos, video clips, and demonstrations. Back in the day, I used to use a lot of shock videos or shock photos. I don't do that as much anymore, but use some relevant video clips or something. I've got, in one of my presentations, I got a photo that I took off of a friend's LinkedIn page that just says an awful lot. And it's a discussion photo. It's one of those things that you can stop and ask a whole bunch of questions, and I can have a 2-hour discussion on one photo. It's that involved and it's that important. You need to use props. I very seldom show up to a training with just my computer. I'm one that does a little bit of magic and stuff, so I'll do some magic tricks that are relevant, some rope tricks, stuff like that, stuff that they relate to, or I'll bring in some magnets and some wire and we'll create a motor. We'll do some different things that is kind of out of the ordinary. I still got a PowerPoint, I've still got my basic outline, but bring in some things that people can touch and be interested in, and bring in some stuff that they've got to figure out. Need to understand that well-timed visual can drive a point home better than words alone. I've got a video that I've used for probably 15, 20 years. It's a video clip out of a movie. And it makes a really good point. And I put that in an awful lot of trainings because it drives a really important point home. And what that drives home in virtually every time I've used it is accountability. And that's one of my core things that I believe in, and it's just a good video, and we need to have those little video clips or those instances or those things that we can drive those points home with. That's a downed wire out there. You can see it smoking, it's arcing. You know, people ask me all the time, well, how come it's still live and energized sitting there? Well, there's many, many reasons. But just a good little video clip like that is a talking point that people can relate to in our industry, that they can ask questions about, they can speculate, and all that's training. We need to include real world scenarios, include both good and bad things that have taken place both in the world and the industry. As a trainer, I get asked all the time, well, you know, what's the incident rate? What's the latest on this incident? Have you heard? What happened? Well, in today's litigious society, there's some things we just don't talk about. But when we can bring things that's taken place in the industry, good and bad, we need to bring them and include that into the training. Need to research and include such things as safe work methods and accepted standard operating practices. We try to customize training to whoever we're going into. So if we're asked to go in and do some grounding and bonding training, one of the first things I ask a client is, send me your work methods and your SOPs. And then we'll tailor that training to what these guys got to deal with every day. Instead of coming in with a canned training that you expect everybody to understand and follow, tailor it to what they deal with every day. Side conversations, the squirrel syndrome. Now, we've got part of our population out there that you might be talking in a group or discussing something, and all of a sudden they're going, squirrel! And that's just a personality trait. And in training, that happens an awful lot, is we get lost on those side conversations. And some of them are good, but some of them don't need to be part of the training. And as a trainer, instructor, facilitator, we need to recognize that and bring back those squirrel conversations back into where we need them to be. Side conversations can be used wisely, but don't let them take over the room. Enough's enough, okay? And we can't continue to go down a rabbit hole. If it's emotional and people want to talk about it, okay, we need to take a little bit of time and talk about it, but we gotta understand when enough's enough. And we've got to stop that conversation and get back to where we should be. And that also, we got to recognize when those side conversations are destructive. And I hear a lot of labor relations, people complaining about their work. And that's not where we should be talking about in a training. If we're there to talk about grounding, or we're there to talk about something else, and people's upset because they feel they're being mistreated, that's not what we're there for. You need to give everybody a chance to say, to talk, to put their 2 cents worth in. I would go as far as say that we need, as facilitators, we need to elicit that in each and every participant. And then when side conversations happen, show appropriate attention. If they're irrelevant, then let's go down it. You know, we need to do it. And then we need to tune into the learner's animated gestures. Some people, including me, we talk with our hands, we talk with our body language. And we need to understand that as trainers, and we need to accommodate that. Using tools and resources. PowerPoints are not the only way. A lot of times trainers use the PowerPoint as the complete training, and PowerPoints are just bullet points. You know, we're following a PowerPoint now, but that's all they are. They're bullet points, they're reminders, and that's all that they should be. Use demonstrations. You know, if we can go out in the field and demonstrate something as part of the training, that's good, or bring a demonstration into the classroom. And it's good to assign class members part of the training. If I've got a multi-day training, I give people homework. And I expect them to do it. And I write down what I've assigned them, and the next day I expect them to come prepared with their homework. And bring in a guest speaker. People are tired of hearing the same old person. So back in the day when I was at the utility, I kind of figured out that I could tell people something in a training, and they may or may not listen to me. But if I brought in somebody from the outside and they gave the exact same presentation I give, people would listen to them. And there's value in that expert that you bring in. Now, my definition of an expert is somebody who had to travel more than 50 miles to get there, but because that's kind of the industry's definition. But you might even bring in some coworkers or somebody from the training and ask them to be part of it. We need to provide performance and proficiency solutions. Don't tell learners what they need to know, give them guidance on why, what, and how so they can move forward. It's nice to give people instruction. It's nice to give them a book, something that they can hand out, something they can refer to, but you've got to make it relevant to them. Why do they need to do this? Now, years ago when we first started introducing equipotential grounding, nobody saw the why. And it was very difficult, and it's still difficult today because nobody really understands the why. So as a trainer, we've got to tell them the why, not just what and how. We got to get into that why. It's very important. Got to stress the importance of forward momentum. We can't keep going back. We've got to keep pushing forward. If things are not measured, we can't expect change or improvement. Now, I know that's a bad word, you know, to measure things, but we need to measure how effective our training is. We need to measure how many people are embracing it, and then we need to correct based on that information. So let's talk about the structure of the material. We're going to revisit those 3 learning styles. So training should utilize a variety of techniques to engage the benefits of all 3 styles of learning. The more senses that are engaged, the more effective the learning. We all have the capability to learn via these 3 learning styles, but are usually dominant in one. Now, me, kinesthetic learning appeals to me. That is probably the number 1 for me, and then auditory is number 2, and then the visual is kind of my last one. But all of us are different. We need to recognize that. So retention rates, we got to understand that if we're lecturing, people are only going to retain about 5%. And if that's okay with you, that they only get 5%, maybe you need another profession, folks. We're just spinning our wheels with that lecture. If we add reading to that, now we retain 10%. Okay, we're getting better. Audio visual, nice PowerPoint, we might get 20%. And then a demonstration, I got a nice little demonstration of electric motor up here. We go through it, or maybe I got a Van de Graaff generator and we talk about static electricity and induction, all that stuff. We're going to retain more. And those are all passive teaching methods. Now we get into participatory teaching methods. Group discussions. We now raise that learning up to retaining about 50%. Then if they've got to practice what they learned and recite and that, they're going to be engaged more, and now they have to facilitate or they got to do something. Now we're retaining about 75%. And here's the big one. If you got to teach others, most of us adults are going to learn all that we can about the subject before we start trying to relay that information to others. So we're going to retain an awful lot. So we can use all of these in conjunction to make the learner's experience more effective. And if lecture is all that you want to do, time to go back to the field or do what you was doing before, in my opinion. Because in our business, it's going to be not well received at all. There's different components of our program. Combining workbooks for conceptual understanding, instructional videos for visual learning, and skills proficiency assessments for practical application creates an effective and comprehensive training approach. That encompasses those three, it encompasses all three of the learning styles. Some people will get more out of the workbook. Some people will get more out of the instructional video or the lecture. Some people will do a whole lot better with the hands-on, but if we force those people to participate in all three of those styles, they're going to get a whole lot more out of that training. Okay, what makes a great course? Video. As adults, we have short attention spans. It's not because we're easily distracted, it's just because we got so much on our mind. So if you've got a video or something, we need to break that up into short segments. Don't keep people there forever watching a video or reading out of a book or something. Break it up into segments. Have little on-the-spot quizzes, stuff like that. Have a workbook, something for them to read, to write things down on. If you've got even a blank piece of paper there with a pencil or a pen where they can write down notes, and encourage them to use that. Or read in a workbook to follow along with a video or your PowerPoint. And those little quizzes, they're important. That's a check for understanding, but it's also stops them with what they're doing and makes people think. And don't forget to take what they've learned to what the practical application is. Now there's a lot of things. Say you're teaching a course on basic electricity. Well, is there some field application to that? Yeah, every day. I often go out into the field and I'll ask a crew to tell me what Ohm's law is. And 95% of the time, people stutter and look at me and, well, it has to do with ohms and these other things. Very seldom can people tell me, workers out in the field, what Ohm's law is. And I go, well, how do you know how to stay safe if you don't understand a basic concept such as that? So even things that we don't think has a field application still has a field application. Have something that they can go out and they can practice what they've learned in class on. Something where they can go out and be there, whether it's a training yard or you're out on the line or something like that. Take a field trip, make it part of your training. If you're teaching people about switching and you've got a little training yard out there that you can go out and show them what a switch looks like, and they can see and they can visualize and they can operate that switch, they're going to get a whole lot out of it that they won't get sitting in the classroom. Implementation and transition planning. So we as a company, we're committed to helping people successfully implement the program in your organization. But there's a lot of things that you can do to implement. One, you need to have a developed training, something that you're not just doing on the fly. Now, out in the field, you can do training out on the fly, but as far as a formal training, you need to have something developed. You need to hold some train-the-trainer workshops. Again, we can't expect people coming out of the field to just know how to train. It's good to have something in the end that we can evaluate how the training was, what happened there. We need to make sure that we schedule training at a time that is convenient for others. If they've got something else going, there's a big project, we got to get it done. First of all, you're probably not get them in there, and if you do get them in the training classroom, they're not going to be invested in it. We need to remember that we need administrative support. We need the leadership support, and we're going to talk more about that as we go on. But we've all been in situations where we schedule a training class and, oh, there's something going on and we got to take people out of the class. Or they're in the class and leadership will come in middle way through the class and take them out of the class because they got something that's more important to do. And it just really frustrates me, and I've been on both sides. I've been out in the field. I started in this industry as a grunt, moved my way up. I went, got my skills, I was asked to go into leadership, and went into leadership in leading crews, and I was asked to take over some safety responsibilities and some training responsibilities, and I've been on every side of the boat here in our industry, and I really feel like if we don't get that top administrative support and teach them or train them to know just how important training is, we're not going to get very far. So we got to make sure we've got that. We've got to make sure that we have qualified trainers, guys. If we don't have qualified trainers, our trainees are just not going to get as much out of it as they should be getting. We need to make sure that we include safety and policies and procedures in our training. Everything should revolve around those things. Now, I know talking about policy and procedure, especially in a training environment, isn't easy, and you can lose a lot of people. But that's where our emotion and our experience needs to kick in there, because we've got to teach how to do the task safely, number one, and two, how we comply and why we should comply. A lot of companies want to have a curriculum that's certified, and that can happen through DOL and some other entities. That's always nice to have. You know, make sure that you get some resources to help you conduct your program. Whether it's internal resources or somebody from the outside, make sure that you've got the resources you need before you get people in front of you to train. And it's always good to have something outside that you can go to, outside the classroom, or even bring something inside the classroom. We was just up in the great state of Alaska here a couple of weeks ago, and we brought virtually every hot stick in the whole training center into class, and we talked about them, and we talked about how to clean them, and we demonstrated, and we got people up out of their seats. And even though it's a tool that they used every day, there was a lot of questions. And so we brought the training art essentially in the classroom, and we can do that sometimes, but it's nice to go out to a training yard or out on the line or something with a group of people and teach them that real world experience. Now, I've always said that you cannot teach a guy to climb a pole off of a video or a PowerPoint, and you can't. Now, you can teach the concepts, the proper way to size your climbing gear, the proper way to wear it, the proper position to get on the pole, all of those things. But until you get out and you experience that climbing the pole, they're really not going to start learning. So we need to have those outside the PowerPoint, outside the video, outside the workbook experiences. Communication's important. With the employees, we got to have effective communication between the employees and management to make the training program a success. We got to have that commitment that they'll be there. And then we as instructors or facilitators, we've got to show those students how important it is for them to be there. It's up to us, not up to them. Need to encourage open discussion about upcoming changes. We need to provide anything about changes that employees might deal with. We need to provide that to them in various forms. And then we need to modify the wording as we distribute that out. If we put a policy or a procedure or some training into place, we got to recognize that not It doesn't apply to everybody the same. We need to have management orientations. If you're introducing a new training program, the first people we should be training is leadership. And I mean right up to the CEO. And you need to work really hard at getting that person's backside sitting in the class. Because if they don't buy into it, you're going to spin your wheels. You need to have a facilitated discussion on policies, procedures, or practice changes. And it can be led by a manager, trainer, or a qualified individual. And we need to make these types of implementation shorter. It's not an all-day thing. We need to do some evaluation placement testing. We need to figure out one of the good ways to get people involved in training is to give them something to where they can take before they get to the class, so that you have an idea of what their knowledge and their skill level is before they get to class. Now you can then tailor the training to them. So experienced workers can be tested for knowledge and skills proficiency for the program placement, see where they need to go in an apprenticeship training or continuing education or whatever it is. The EPT evaluates the worker's knowledge in apprenticeship levels or journey level, and the evaluation of objective questions and subjective essays to determine initial recommendation for remedial training. Have some workstations to where they can perform a task, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 things, a task that they can do, and where they get to show their skills and you can kind of assess them, and have that recognized evaluation placement testing in place for whatever training you're doing. Then you get the right people in the training and giving that need to be there, and you also can tailor that training to those people and those individuals. So in my opinion, that's very important, and that we don't see it a lot in our industry. We show up and to a customer and we meet a group of people, that's selected by our customer, and they're in there and we don't get it. But if you can evaluate who should be in that class before you send them to class, they'll get more out of it. You need to audit your training program. The training program must adhere to prescribed standards. If you're teaching equipotential grounding, you need to audit and find out, okay, well, we've given the training, we've gone out into practice yard, we've done the practical applications, now here you go out. Well, a month later, we need to evaluate, well, are people doing it? Did they learn something? Where did we fail? What do we got to do to make it successful? Your company or third-party entities need to conduct audits for compliance, which may include access to learner documentation, observation of the training sessions. It's good to have somebody look in and make sure, whether it's another one of your trainers or maybe your boss or somebody else that can audit how the program is going, how the training is going, and how you as a facilitator are developing. And we see this a lot in the co-op world, where they have a committee of people from different co-ops that will go to another co-op and do an audit. And so you get a lot of opinions or a lot of experience from different areas that will come in and audit your program, and that's a good thing. I think that the co-ops have got that right. So what makes a qualified trainer? We've talked about a lot of principles and a lot of different things today so far, but really, what does make a qualified trainer? And now that's not a question that is easily answered. So first of all, we need experienced workers, several years of experience. Guys, it's good to have the book knowledge, but that time in the saddle matters an awful lot when you're a trainer, because you're going to get asked questions or put in the spot so many times, and if you don't have some experience, you're not going to be successful. We need to successfully complete a train-the-trainer workshop. Again, we need to give the trainers tools they need to succeed. We can't expect them, just because they're good in the field or they're good in front of the computer or they can read prints or whatever, to transfer that knowledge to somebody else is a skill, and we need to give them those skills. We need to have some experience in training operations staff. It's preferred but not required. Most of us do. If we've been in the trade very long, we do training without thinking about it. We're out there talking to our co-workers, or you're up on the pole, or you're up in the bucket with somebody and they go to do something and, oh, wait a minute, here's a better way to do this. And we're doing that training. We just don't really realize that. Nowadays, somebody who's computer literate is preferred, but it's not required. And I'm one of those old dogs. Computers and cell phones and all this stuff, they just don't speak to me. I could just as easy go back to the day when I had a grease pen and a plastic sheet on an overhead projector. That's how I started training, and that was a lot easier for me. But the way that our business is run now, we need to have somebody that's computer literate that's in training. And here's one that we don't often talk about, but a good safety record. If you got a trainer up in front of you telling you what to do, and you know that he's gone out and he's gotten hurt, or he doesn't do what he's preaching, you're going to lose him. You need to standardize your training. Make sure that we consistently teach the same thing, the same standards, the same outlook. We need to adhere to the program guidelines. Now, it's all right to go out down those rabbit holes and talk about those side conversations, but we've got to stay with the program. Learners need to be held to the same standard requirements. We got to keep them focused on what's important. Need to add material. It's acceptable. We just don't want to delay progress. Sometimes we over prepare and we have too much, and then we try and get through it all. Time's important. So make sure that you don't add too much. And we need to eliminate areas of study that's not acceptable and may compromise standardization. Sometimes the old dog coming in and doing training is counterproductive. We got to make sure that all of our trainers are training the same way, using the same material, doing the same thing, throughout. Too often, we let our leadership out in the field do a big part of the training, and everybody's got their own different way of doing things. And as a company, we need to standardize how people do things, because people will get hurt if we don't. So we get questions all the time about certifying your program, your curriculum. And there's a lot of entities out there that will do them, but probably the most common entity is the Department of Labor, DOL. So the Department of Labor certifications can be made using one training program or mixing, matching, or multiple programs. So DOL certifies curriculum. They don't certify like our T&D PowerSkills Lineman apprenticeship program. They don't certify the program. They certify curriculum. They don't certify the ISP substation curriculum. They certify the curriculum that you as a company put together. So as you as a company, you might use JATC for part of your training. You might use T&D PowerSkills for part of your training. You might use NECA for part of your training. And you put it all together as a curriculum, and that's all right. You might develop some of that internally. That's all right. You take that curriculum and you go through the Department of Labor or other certifying companies' process, and they register your program if it complies. And then at the end of that, there's some benefits, and that we'll talk about later. But it's the curriculum that they are approving or certifying. It is not somebody's whatever. So it can be a mix of whatever you've got. We've got one of our customers in Georgia who developed probably half of their training inside, and then bought some of our training, and then they have some other training that they put into it. And so their apprenticeship training is actually 8 years long. They have, instead of a traditional 4-year apprenticeship, they have an 8-year, but they have so many things that they put into their training. They went through DOL in this case, got it certified through DOL, but it's the curriculum that they put together. It's not the length of it or who provided it or whatever. It is that curriculum meets a certain set of standards according to that certifying body, which in our industry, more people are going through the Department of Labor than anybody. Okay, questions. What do you mean by a certifying authority? So a certifying authority is any organization that's qualified to certify training programs and individuals. Your company can be a certifying authority. The U.S. Department of Labor, Bureau of Apprenticeship and Training is a certifying authority. The American Red Cross is a certifying authority. Some state Department of Labor agencies are certifying authorities. ISPC, we're a certifying authority. We can do that as well. And can my company be a certifying authority? And yeah, you can. OSHA allows that. Now, a lot of companies today in the litigious society that we have, we're in a very litigious environment that wasn't there even 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. They want some horsepower behind that training program, somebody that says that it's relevant. And through the litigation work that we do, we understand that and how important that is, that your curriculum or your training program in your entity, we would certainly recommend that you get it certified by somebody, because when something bad happens, that's going to help you. Will my company be recognized as a certifying authority then? You know, probably not, but you can have your company be one. It's kind of a difficult thing to have and do, so we wouldn't really recommend that. How can I improve the value my employees receive in a certification provided for our training program? There's two primary options for wider recognition of a certified program. One, apply to DOL or the equivalent state agency, and contract with other certifying companies to certify your program. That third party or that objective look will help you if you ever get into that litigation side of things, and we hope that nobody ever ends up there. But that adds a third-party look that says that, hey, you're doing something right here. Advantages of certification process of DOL: one, it's widely recognized. There's a record-keeping standardized and maintained by the U.S. Department of Labor, so they already maintain records. So now you've got your program as part of that. The reporting requirements are standardized in the U.S. government certificate upon completion, and that's what we see a lot of people get into the certification process is all about to them, is if you go to DOL, you can get a certificate of completion that says that you're a journeyman or that you've completed this material or whatever, and that's transferable throughout the country. And outside certification agencies such as ours or others can do the same thing. So the advantage of other outside certification is recognized as an independent authority. Record keeping may be customized to the company needs. That's something that DOL is not interested in doing. Program parameters may be customized to the company needs, and reporting requirements may be customized. The company decides all matters relating to employee compensation or stepped rates. DOL has their formula that they require you to go on that. There's no specific recruiting requirements. The company's decision to enroll or remove employees, and it's not the government's. And there's an accepted certification upon completion. So there's different ways you can go on here, but we certainly recommend that you do something. So some disadvantages to DOL is submittal of a complex application, standards required. So we have a lot of customers that start down this road themselves and eventually call us up and say, well, we tried, but we need some help. It is not an easy process. It's somewhat inflexible with requirements. It's cumbersome process for enrolling employees and removing them from the program. It is anything government, I'm sorry, but anything government's going to be complicated. There's no online record-keeping options. It includes scheduled wage rates and program step raises based on where employees are in the program and how they advance, and they must demonstrate that the company has attempted to recruit females and minorities into the program. And in some areas of the country, that's hard. So a lot of times people will stay out of the DOL process because of just that. The disadvantages of other certification: consulting projects, service agreements with fees required. You got to pay somebody to help you. The routine program student progress review is required, and then other subject matter experts evaluate graduate candidates prior to award of the experience certificate. So you're going to have somebody come in and do a third-party evaluation. And the program may be audited by other subject matter experts and consultants at others' discretion. So that's what we have courts of law for. Okay, learning management systems. The world's kind of going that way. Digital, online learning. It applies for many things. We can do an awful lot, but there's just some things that we just can't teach that way, but they are effective. Good learning management systems are scalable. You can use them smartphones, tablets, desktops, wherever. From slow cellular connections to high-speed broadband, they're responsive, native app speed, they're on the web. You can open them up and look at them in the field. We have a lot of customers that'll call me up and they have a question about something, and I tell them, well, you've got our LMS, just open your phone, look it up. You can watch a retraining video or look through a workbook. You can get questions answered there. There are advantages to these learning management systems. Usually they have some administrative features like student management and tracking, field performance and progress reports, real-time performance data, and you can data export into your personnel files and stuff like that. And a lot of people use LMSs for their training just for these reporting requirements, these administrative features that they have. It takes some of the work out of things because the LMS automatically records completion and how well I did on a test and those different features. So lastly here, we're just going to talk about some competencies. All of our training needs to be based on something. It is not productive, and it's certainly not quantifiable, nor can you legally represent yourself if you just sit down and made a PowerPoint because you think this is the way things should be done. At some point, a smart lawyer is going to make a fool out of you. We've got to base all of our training that we develop on something. Now, there's a list out there of 191 basic line worker competencies. Okay, that list is generally accepted throughout the U.S., and we've seen some of our clients in Canada that also accept that. In the Caribbean, they accept it. So all of the training that our company, and I know a lot of other companies, base their training based on a list of competencies. This is what people need to know. They need to have this knowledge. They need to know how to do this. And we've got to be able to back that up. Because what we don't want to happen is somebody gets hurt and Uncle Sam comes calling. They want to see your training records. And then that gets to a smart lawyer, and all of a sudden you end up in court, and you are trying to, as a trainer and as a company, you're trying to justify why you trained this person this way, or why you didn't train this person this way. It happens both ways. And if you can't refer back to competencies, you're going to be in a tough spot. Now, that's just from a litigious and from a regulatory standpoint. But let's really talk about standardization of training. Now, as far as craft training in our trade, there is no standardization. JTC sees it one way, Merchant sees it another way. All of these curriculum that's out there sees training a little bit different. They see what needs to be in that training a little bit differently. But as long as you've got those competencies to back up that training, then you've done your due diligence in making sure that you provide the training, the knowledge, and the skills that your workers need to be successful. Whether it's craft training, whether it's safety training, whether it's leadership development, no matter what kind of training it is, if you've got a basis for it, something that you teach to, then one, it's defendable, but number two, it's going to be relatable to those people out there doing the work. Folks, training's important. As I said right up front, I don't believe in common knowledge. We was not born knowing that that light switch on the wall turned the light on or off. We had to be trained in that, and there's lots of types of training. But we as companies, we as safety professionals, we as trainers, we as people who care, we cannot afford to ask people who have not been trained in how to do a task and why they should be doing it that way. We just can't ask them to do that. As trainers, we need to have the skills, the knowledge, the experience to be a good trainer. Most of us who came out of the field to be a trainer stumbled an awful lot because we didn't have the skills. So it's important that as trainers we give them the tools they need to succeed. And that doesn't mean just a handful of books. That means we need to give them the training they need to be a successful trainer. And we cannot be successful in training if we don't have that top management support. No matter how good of a trainer you are, if operations comes and takes people out of your class, we're not going to be successful, folks. Most times those people never end back up in class when they should. So get leadership support, train your trainers. Give them the tools they need to succeed. Have a training curriculum that is in depth, that is more than just a lecture, that encompasses all different types of learning styles. Have a program that speaks to your worker. Make sure you don't talk a foreign language to them. Make sure you involve them in their learning. We got to teach not just the what and how, but something we haven't been good at teaching is the why. The why matters. The why is where the rubber hits the road, guys. Use your competencies. Use your information. Make it relevant. It's been my pleasure and my honor to be here. This is a get-to for me. It's a get-to for my people. This electric culture of safety is important. The membership's growing for a good reason. We all need to be involved in making sure that our folks are trained, that they have the tools they need to succeed, and that we train our trainers. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and you folks have a good day.